Hi, everyone. Teri Wellbrock here with the Healing Place podcast. I have so much going on that's exciting. I can hardly stand it all. Yes, so I'm working on audiobook number 5, which is actually a business book about creating your own, starting up your own business, and a really awesome book. So I cannot wait to put that out into the universe. For any of you who have thought about starting your own business, definitely one to check out, because it talks about whether it's sole proprietorship all the way up to a corporation kind of business. So, and LLCs, which I once had an LLC at one point until I sold that part of my company off to the co-owner. And I've learned about LLPs and S Corps and C Corps just from narrating this book. So it's been wonderful. So you have to check that out. The other 4 audiobooks are in the healing arena, so be sure to go check those out. If you go to Audible and type in Teri Wellbrock, TeriWellbrock, you can find those 4 books there. You can use your Audible credits or you can just purchase outright. I still have the interview with one of the authors of the 2-book series, the Best Bedtime Stories for Stressed Out Adults series. I did book 1 and book 2. I narrated those. I'll be editing that interview over the next few days, and that should be coming out as a special episode, so be sure to tune in, listen for that one. I'm also starting to partnership up, or have partnershiped up. I just haven't done an announcement yet, so I guess this is the official, first announcement, with a company that I came across a product of theirs that has really, 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 really helped me along my healing journey. Not just with my skin issues from the mold toxicity, and helping that clear up, but with some of the lingering remnants of trauma and my complex post-traumatic stress disorder, the CPTSD. So that's kind of a little bonus. I just did a Facebook Live yesterday on that, talking about oxidative stress and what that is. So if you want to pop on over to Facebook and go to the Healing Place podcast, which that page is now up to 8,500 followers. So if you are not yet a part of that and you're a Facebook fan, please go over and hit like or follow. And I try to post a number of inspirational memes or something funny or something helpful for your healing journey every day. So yes, you can find that there. Personally, my skin continues to improve and heal again with the added bonus of this product that I am going to be sharing with all of you. Well, today's interview, oh my gosh, I just laughed and loved it, and just what a beautiful light. I'm very excited to share this episode with you. An amazing story of triumph. Yes, just be prepared to be amazed at this incredible story of triumph. All right, now for the show. Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I am your host, Teri Wellbrock, and smiling big again. So very happy to have with me Geralyn S. Ritter, and she is author, trauma survivor, mother, and corporate executive. So welcome.
Thank you, Teri. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Well, I am just, again, I'm beaming because I talked to you for just 5 minutes before hitting record, and love your energy, love your spirit, and just so very thrilled to have you here to share your story of triumph. So yeah, can we, I guess, just kind of dive into
Absolutely.
Your story?
Absolutely. The thing about my story that it still strikes even me was how ordinary a day it was. It was just a normal Tuesday work day like I had had 1,000 times. I woke up, I had an early trip that day. I worked for a major company. I was often in Washington, D.C. I'd gotten up early that morning, gotten on the train, gone down to Washington, did my meetings, was back home that night. Well, was planning to be back home that night. And as the train pulled out of Philadelphia a little after 9 o'clock in the evening, I sat down. It had been a long day. I sat on the train. I texted my husband, leaving Philly, home soon. He responded right away, hey, look forward to seeing you tonight. Stevie, at the time, our 8-year-old, had a great baseball game. He got a legitimate base hit. And I have 3 sons. Stevie's my youngest, and let's just say a base hit was a big deal for Stevie. So,
Oh,
I texted back, "That's great." Just so ordinary. And, "See you soon." Okay. Um, and I put down my phone. I stood up in the aisle of the train, and I wanted to get something out of my briefcase. I was getting my iPad out. I just wanted to read to pass the time till the next stop when I would get off. And I noticed the train was going, it seemed to be going fast. I'd taken this train 100 times, like I said. And for a moment, I was kind of glad. I thought, great, I just want to get home. It's 9:15 at night. I'm tired. And then we were rocking so much, I had to hold on to the luggage rack above my head, and I started getting annoyed. Like I kept losing my balance, and I couldn't get what I wanted out of my briefcase. And then the train went around a curve, and you feel that lean. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it feels like we're tipping. And I remember very clearly thinking, no, that's impossible. We can't be tipping. Trains don't tip. And I remember a flash of, no, a realization, we are tipping over. And the very last thing I remember is screaming. And I would learn later that the train was going 106 miles an hour into a curve designed for a maximum of 50.
wow.
The train derailed, and 8 people lost their lives that night. Hundreds were injured, and I was severely injured and very nearly, in fact, the surgeons told my family I was not going to survive.
Wow. Wow. Well, I know I got onto your website. Thank you for sharing onto your website and followed some links and was just reading things and went to the page that you dedicate to the 8 who lost their lives. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just took a moment to look at their faces and send up a little prayer for each of them because wow, so powerful. And you're right, just how it can shift in a second. And,
In a second, going
yeah,
from the completely ordinary to the life-changing, world-changing in a heartbeat, literally in a heartbeat. And I do still take the train. I have coached myself to be able to do that. Um, but when we go by that spot, that curve on the tracks, I feel it in my bones. Even if I'm reading or doing something else or trying to distract myself so that I'm not scared, I feel it and I close my eyes and I just bow my head and try to honor those 8 people who, there's just no explanation. Many of them were sitting right around me in the first car. The first car of the train was the business class car. It was the only business class car. So there are good records of who was sitting there and that sort of thing. I remember there were not that, it was about 12 people, 12 of us on that car. And some of those faces were sitting right around me. And so, by the grace of God, I'm here talking to you. But
right.
I am always conscious of those that did not make it home that night.
Yeah. Well, you say you felt it in your bones, and I know the name of your memoir is it Bone by Bone?
It is, and
Yeah.
I was very severely injured. So the title has kind of a double meaning. It's an allusion to, of course, the very gradual process of healing bone by bone. I would have a dozen surgeries. I was on total disability from my job for about 2.5 years. I was on a ventilator, immobilized in ICU for quite a long time. And healing is not a straight line. I learned painfully that, you don't get over one bump and then it's just a nice straight line improvement every day. Don't I wish? It's
Right.
a more crooked journey than that, with ups and downs. But the trauma can also be very alienating. And as much as I had a loving family around me, I had great medical care, I had friends and colleagues that wanted to do nothing more than support us. Nobody can understand. Nobody can really understand. And, as the pain from my injuries wore on, as the reality that I was not going back to work anytime soon, that I couldn't even get out of bed, get to the bathroom by myself, much less drive or get up to the second floor of my house where my bedroom was, as the reality of my situation sank in, um, and the pain wore on, that feeling of disconnectedness was really tough. And there's an amazing poem by Emily Dickinson called "There is a pain so utter it swallows substance up." And it talks about that disconnectedness, the dissociation that they say is almost a hallmark of trauma. And she talks about how the memory kind of has this protective effect, and disconnects you from some of the traumatic events of the past, but also from some of those around you. And the last line of the poem is, and there then you go safely, where it with an open eye would drop you bone by bone. And so that's why I called my top book, that's why I used that phrase in the title of my book.
Oh gosh, I had goosebumps went down my legs. Oh my gosh. So when I went through EMDR therapy for over 4 years, for my trauma in my childhood and in younger years, I had been through two horrific bank robberies 3 months apart by the
Oh,
same perpetrators.
oh my
And during the
goodness.
second one, I was trapped between two gunmen.
Oh
And
my
so I
goodness.
had to choose between running towards death or death, because the highway was in front of me with a bunch of,
Oh yeah.
fences and trees, and I couldn't go that way, and a house
Right.
behind me. So it was like, which direction do I run to get away from this? So when I would go back into EMDR,
Right.
it was always as if, uh, because the therapist takes you back into the memories,
Hmm.
it was as if I was watching a movie. And so what you're talking about was that dissociation. It was as if I was watching it happen to someone else. And I'll never, ever forget, maybe about year 3 of this process, um, just sobbing. And my therapist said, what's happening? And I said, for the first time, I turned my head when we returned to that particular moment in time, and I was seeing it through my own eyes. And so I I was
Interesting.
back in my body, like I was able to be comfortable in this body. I no longer had to dissociate. So that's what I was, when you were talking about it, I was, yeah, you're right. How
Exactly.
powerful trauma and our brains and our bodies can be in protecting us from that trauma.
And I remember in some of those early days realizing that I could deliberately leave my body, and I would go there when I couldn't take it. Sometimes at night when I was in ICU, I'm on a ventilator, you're immobilized. So it was blink once for yes, blink twice for no. So you can't speak, you can't move. I was in overwhelming pain. My family had all left. The nurses would come in to wash my wounds, my surgical incisions. They would need to roll me onto either side because I had injuries on my front and my back. And I remember thinking, I, you know, when you can't speak, you can't express yourself, you can't move, and I literally would just close my eyes. The one thing I felt like I could do was pray, and I remember thinking that is the only thing I can do is close my eyes and silently pray. And I would try to will myself to be anywhere else. I really would try to just disconnect with where I was, and I could to some extent. I could. That sounds so strange, but I needed to go to that safer place. And it's so strange, actually, for well over a year after the accident, and even to this day, after I have a medical procedure, I would lay in bed, I was back home, and I would be like a tipped over zombie. My hands would be reaching for the ceiling. It would freak my husband out. Sometimes in the middle of the night, he'd look over, I'm laying flat on my back with my arms reached up toward the ceiling. Sometimes I'd be moaning, sometimes not. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I'm perfectly awake and I would just have my hands up and he'd say, "What are you doing?" I say, I can't explain it. That it just feels like a comfortable position, which it's totally not. After an hour, like I would drop my phone, my arms would be so tired. And I knew intellectually I could put my arms down, but I didn't want to. And it didn't make sense to me for months. All I knew, I was thinking maybe, well, in the hospital when I was immobilized, I could move my arms. So maybe that was, maybe that's why. But I realized as I was telling the story of the crash to someone, and I almost, without thinking, had described how I was holding onto the luggage rack above my head when we crashed, to keep myself steady. And my psychiatrist had said to me, he said, that was your last moment of safety. And it may well, I've had an emergency responder tell me, it may well have been what saved me because many of the people in the first car did not survive. The fact that I was standing in the middle away from the windows and was braced with my hands over my head holding onto the luggage rack. We'll never know, and to this day I don't know who found me in the rubble. I do know that I was found quickly and that person most certainly saved my life. But it's amazing to me. I had a big surgery just last year, 7 years after the accident, and I woke up from anesthesia with my arms reaching toward the ceiling. And it's a harmful gesture as they go, but it is amazing how those memories are just stored in our bones. They're there. And
Yes.
I may not think about them anymore nearly as much, but they're a part of us.
Yes. Wow. That is just incredibly powerful. And I'm like intuitively, I'm saying, oh gosh, yes, that's
It makes
exactly what
sense,
was
doesn't
going
it?
on. Yes. Wow.
We're the same crazy, Terry.
Right. Oh, I'm right there with you. That's amazing. Holy, and
Yeah.
I am going to emphasize that. So I would have after the bank robberies, and I was experiencing horrific panic attacks, particularly on bridges, because to me, there was no escape. It was like being trapped in an
Ah,
open space, right?
right,
So the only escape was this way or this way, same as
right.
that particular
Mm,
moment. Like the only
right,
escape was this way or this way. I couldn't go this way or this way.
right.
And so I found myself when driving that I would start to like
Mm,
veer to the right, veer to the
right,
right, veer to the right. And I was like, why am I always like veering? I don't want to drive off the bridge. I don't want to kill
right,
myself. Like, what is
right.
happening? Well, during the first bank robbery, a gun was held to my left temple by the gentleman that
Oh,
ended up pulling the trigger and murdering a coworker. And
oh my
so
goodness.
to me, having that, I was always trying like get away from the scary, to get
Yeah,
away from
that makes
the
perfect
sensation.
sense.
And so once we realized that, we, again, like you were able to do some coaching and training work, brain rewiring stuff, and
Right,
yeah, help that recenter itself. But it was my brain saying, get away from it, get away from
right.
it, go right,
Right, right.
go that way.
Well, and intellectually, you know it would be much safer to drive in the middle
True.
of the lane,
Right.
but our nervous system is just dialed up, and your brain wants to protect you with what it knows for some reason, and that rational voice can get drowned out.
Yes. Oh, for sure, for sure. Wow, powerful. So now you've put this book out, which
Mhm.
is your story of hope and triumph. And now do you do speaking engagements and travel and talk to people about it?
I do, and I didn't start out to write a book. In the beginning, my husband would search for me all night long. My three sons were calling hospitals. We're looking for our mom. She was on the train. So eh, the whole family was really traumatized that night. And I was a Jane Doe. Nobody knew who I was. If you think about it, if a guy gets thrown out of the train, he probably has a wallet in his pocket. a woman probably has her bag, her wallet's probably in her bag, under the seat, on the seat, somewhere else. And so it does haunt me that they were pretty sure I was dying. I was life flighted in a helicopter to a fantastic level one trauma center. They got me into surgery right away. They, were able to keep me alive until my husband did find me the next morning. Um, but it was touch and go for quite a while. And but in the beginning, when it became clear that I probably would live and that I didn't have a major brain injury, my chest was crushed. Most of my abdominal organs were either destroyed or perforated in the wrong place. My pelvis was broken in half. I had big traumatic, penetrating wounds, broken my neck and my lower back, but fortunately in just such a way that they thought my spinal cord was going to be okay. Um, but we were just so grateful. We were just so grateful. I knew that other people had not survived, and I may have been immobilized on a ventilator and blinking once for yes and twice for no, but I was there. And as the weeks passed, some of the things they were worried about, overwhelming infection, that kind of thing, did not come to pass. And it became more and more we weren't sure about the quality of life, but that I would live. And then I go so unrealistic. You're determined to be positive. You're grateful you lived. I had always been kind of a planner or a hard charging person. I had a, career that I was very proud of. And I just thought, well, you break your arm, heals in about 6 weeks. I'm calling my boss saying, I'll be back by the end of the summer. And I remember my mom telling me she would leave the room when she would hear me say that kind of thing because everybody knew that it wasn't true. But nobody wanted to dash my hopes. And summer came and went, one more surgery, call my boss again. Oh, need a little more time, another couple months. And I eventually got very depressed because I was missing all of these unrealistic milestones I'd set out for myself. I felt like I was failing recovery. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe I was wallowing, a lot of sort of self-blame for why am I so unhappy? I lived. I don't deserve to be unhappy. I should be happy. I'm the lucky one. But it's hard to be grateful for pain for that long. And I started just taking notes because so many people were doing such incredibly kind things for me and my family. Or my boys would say something. I mean, they were 8, 12, and 15 at the time of the accident. And they would say something. I thought, oh, I just want to remember that. So I started, taking notes. And it wasn't until a full year after the accident, like I said, I didn't set out to write a book. I usually don't keep a diary or a journal. I just haven't been that person. And I'd had a really tough reconstructive surgery. I'd almost died again. I'd coded after the accident. They'd had a hard time resuscitating me, back in ICU for a week and a half. And I was in my wheelchair and I went in to visit work, after I got out of the hospital, just to say hi to folks, just to say, hey, I'm still here. Don't forget about me. And I remember going into the CEO's office and just saying hello. And he was very kind. He'd always been a wonderful mentor to me. And I was telling him about this latest ordeal. And he said, Geralyn, you have to write a book. And I said, nah, Ken, I don't want it to be like, look how strong I am. I survived, or self kind of glorifying. I said, I didn't do anything to deserve to survive that those other 8 people didn't do or wouldn't have done. And he said, no, 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 no. You're thinking about it all wrong. He said, you have a story to tell and it can help people. And he said, you have a witness. And he quoted scripture on me, which I never expected coming from the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. But he said, the Bible says, don't hide your light under a bushel. Let it shine so that all can see the glory of God. And he said, you can help people. And it was like a light switch went on. It was like, put the story out there And if nobody buys the book, nobody needs it, great. I'm glad nobody needs it, right? I'm glad nobody else is kind of going through that sort of experience. But if it helps one person, if one person draws hope or something in there makes them smile or laugh, or they try something in their own recovery from whatever's troubling their life that they might not have otherwise have tried, then some little piece of good came out of this accident that otherwise is just a black hole in my life and a source of so much pain. And that helps me put it in perspective. So it's a very long answer to your question, but that is why I wrote the book. It's why I pledged from the beginning I wouldn't make a dime off of it. I donate everything that comes in to the American Trauma Society or to they have a program within the American Trauma Society. It's a peer support network for trauma survivors, the Trauma Survivor Network. So I donate, any proceeds that come in from the book, but um I'm glad that it's out there, and when I do have the opportunity to speak with medical professionals about the patient perspective on trauma, or professional groups about restarting your career after years out of the workforce, to me it's one thing positive that I can do with this experience. So I enjoy appearing on fantastic shows like yours and just trying to connect with listeners because everybody has something. Maybe not everybody had a train crash at 100 miles an hour or a bank robbery, but none of us walk through life unscathed,
Right.
and I really do believe there's power in our stories.
Oh, amen. And I love your energy and just I sitting here and I feel like I'm kind of melting just listening to your voice and you have this beautiful way of
Thank you.
presenting and there's just a gratitude that radiates from you and I know that that's been part of and I think when you were writing down your little notes it really was becoming like a gratitude journal and the focus on those things, those gifts that were coming. Well, my sister and I call it the gifts within the chaos, and so being able to find those little gifts. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. I remember clearly it was months into my recovery. I was at a particularly low point. I was trying to wean off of all the very heavy pain medication, not all of them, but at least some of the fentanyl and the heaviest pain medications that I'd been on for months. And, so on top of the pain of breathing with a shattered rib cage and all of these pelvic injuries that made it so difficult to move and to walk, I was dealing with the symptoms of opioid, weaning off the opioids. And I'm fortunate I don't seem to have the brain chemistry or the genetic makeup that made me have the addiction cravings, but your body becomes very physically dependent. And so the chills, the nausea, the dizziness, it was insult on injury.
yeah.
And I was really feeling very low. And I'm sitting in bed in my bathrobe, haven't moved, and it's 3 in the afternoon and my three rowdy sons, then by that point they're 9 and 13 and 15, and they come running in the door at 3 in the afternoon. And again, it was one of those kind of lightning bolt moments. And I thought, you know what? I'm here. Like I'd always worked, there growing up, and I'd be at every baseball game after work, in my suit and my heels walking across the field. I was there, but I wasn't there when they would come home from school at 3. I'm home by dinner. And I thought, wow, it's been 9 months and who knows how much longer I'm there on the first floor, can't go anywhere else. I'm right there when they come home from school. And I thought, don't waste this. And you realize those little silver linings. It's not how I would choose to be at home and spend this time with them, but I started resolving that every day by 3, maybe I was showered, I'd try to be dressed, but I'd be out of bed. I didn't want them coming home every day and mom is still in bed. And I really credit them with helping me keep myself accountable, help me pull out of the depression and be up when they got home from school. Even if we all piled right back in bed and watched a movie in the afternoon. How awesome is that on a Wednesday afternoon? I'd never gotten to do that before. So, the power of reframing, I really, you have to be intentional about it. It doesn't just happen. But I really found ways to try to reframe and try to make myself see the benefits. There's no other way to say it. The sparkles of good in the situation, because they were there. They were there.
Yes, beautiful. Oh my gosh, I love it. And you're speaking to my heart. And so yes. And it's true. I read somewhere, I can't remember where I read it, but something about your infectious laugh. And it's so true. You have the best. My sister has a great laugh. I'm ranking you up there with my sister. It's a great laugh.
My sons call it a cackle. I have to say, I don't think they appreciate it as much. We'll be out to dinner and they'll be like, "Mom, mom,
No,
people
I
are looking."
love those. When I'm in a restaurant and, on the other side of the restaurant, someone just throws their head back and sets it free, I will
Exactly.
start laughing at my table because I'm like, I love hearing a great
It's
laugh from across the
contagious.
restaurant.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, I could sit in here and talk to you for hours, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to certainly talk about anything that maybe you feel moved to talk about.
Oh goodness. I'm often asked what I take away from this experience, and there's no one thing. Excuse me. Trauma does change you. It's you don't move on, right? You move forward. People talk about getting your life back. You don't go back when it's has such a profound effect on you and your family. But um, for me, the toughest thing was always dealing with the uncertainty, dealing with not knowing. Doctors didn't really know how well I would recover, whether my pain would eventually fade and I'd be able to manage it. They still don't know, will I need more surgeries down the line? Every year the answer seems to be yes. For something different. It's kind of a new surprise, and the diagnosis is sort of like, well, you're you. But it is okay. It is okay. And the balance between being optimistic and being grateful, but holding yourself to that cold, hard realism. That was one of the toughest things for me. And to this day, getting that balance right, being optimistic, keeping a good perspective, seeing the positive, it's huge. But as I learned early on, being unrealistic, it just sets yourself up for failure. There's a great story I read in one of my favorite business books, and you may know it. It's told by Admiral Jim Stockdale. He was a prisoner of war in Hanoi in Vietnam, and he was interviewed after that harrowing experience as a prisoner of war for years. And he was asked, how did you make it through? And he said, I never doubted. I never doubted that I was going to make it out, and this was going to be the defining moment of my life. And they said, well, who who didn't survive? Who just mentally, emotionally couldn't, you know, cracked? And he said, oh, that's easy. The optimists. And it's not what you expect him to say. He said, they're the ones that said, we'll be out by Christmas, and Christmas would come and go. We'll be out by Easter, and Easter would come and go. We'll be out by the summer. He said, and they died of a broken heart. He said, I never lost faith that I would get out, but I also had to accept it wasn't going to be on my time. I couldn't do anything about the timing, and it was going to be a lot longer than any of us thought we could manage. And that balance, that tug of war between acceptance, and the optimism that things will get better is tough, and it's different for everyone. I think rupture of a relationship or it's a medical crisis. There is that balance that for me was one of the most difficult, but I think one of the most profound learnings coming out of the experience.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it is my nickname for the longest time was Glitter Shitter because
Oh, I love that.
because I just like the epitome of optimism and
Right,
positivity and like how looking at life through rose-colored glasses. Like, well, we will
right.
get through this. But I also realized that through it all, I was also having this undercurrent of real being a realist of
Yeah,
well, look, you've been through this trauma stuff before, and this is the journey, and hang on for the ride. You got to get yourself through this.
right.
So yeah, you're right. It is a balance of facing the reality of not dissociating and trying to live
Yep,
from that place of dissociation,
right.
but being in the reality of it, but also say, having the faith and the positivity and the all of that intertwined with it. So yeah, that's great. Thank you for that story.
It's great. And the last thing I'll say is, people have heard of post-traumatic stress, but not that many people have heard of post-traumatic growth. But it's real. I mean,
Yeah.
there are papers in medical journals about that phenomenon. Just like they've heard of survivor's guilt, but not necessarily survivor's pride. And that too is a really real phenomenon. And I take no pride in having survived the accident. Well, I'll never know why. That was a gift. That was an undeserved gift that I received. But I do take pride in getting through the next day and the next day and the next day because survival is hard. And I've learned not to feel guilty about that pride because it's hard earned.
Yes.
It's really hard earned, and it was difficult to get here. And there's a creative opportunity in survival, things you never thought you would do, things you never thought would work. You get pushed far enough, you're willing to try. I had
Amen.
always dismissed meditation as a bunch of mumbo jumbo and, yoga was for people that didn't actually want to sweat when they exercised, and breathing exercise. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story. When I was pregnant with my first son, I refused to go. I told my husband, I am not going to those Lamaze breathing classes. I told him, you know what? I've been breathing for 30 years. I think I'm good at it. I'm not going. I don't have time for that kind of thing.
Right.
But as the pain wore on, as I was weaning off the opioids, as I was so incredibly miserable, you start thinking, well, I've tried everything else. I have every doctor, every specialist, every drug, Western medicine has to offer. And you open yourself up to trying new things. And I still find breathing exercises very boring, but I have to admit they help. They
Yes.
gave me back some sense of control over my body and some ways that I could do without arguing with a pharmacist to help manage my pain. And very gentle yoga turns out actually really is helpful. Who knew?
Right. Right.
So there are opportunities in these dark times, and things we carry with us as we go forward.
Yes. Oh, I love it so much. And again, I radiate like soul sister moments because I
Absolutely.
so talk about remember my therapist talking to me about doing 4 square breathing. And I was like, how's that going to help? What? And so,
Exactly.
trying to learn these breathing techniques throughout therapy. So, yes.
It's true. It's true.
Oh
I
my
thought,
God.
okay, put your cynicism on hold. You ain't got a
Yeah.
better idea here.
Right. Right. Well, and I love that you opened yourself up to it because I've talked about it so often on the show about building our big, huge coping skills toolboxes. And
Yeah.
yeah, so as I stepped onto the healing journey, like something would come across my radar, Ho'oponopono Hawaiian healing, and I'd be
Uh-huh.
like, ooh, let's see what
Let's
that's
try
all
that.
about. Yeah, let's give it a
Right.
whirl. And just found that I really, really love that. And it really resonated with me. So yes,
Interesting.
audience, be open to things that come across your radar and say,
That's right.
I wonder if
Give
this
it
is
a
the thing.
try. Give
Yeah,
it a try. You got nothing to lose.
right,
Absolutely.
right.
Unless your healing tool is cliff diving or something.
Oh, right, right. Veering right off the bridge.
Exactly. But,
Don't do
within
that.
reason. No, 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 exactly.
Oh my gosh. So
Anyway, well, I
how
think we're ending on a great note that
I
laughter
know, I
laughter is
know.
actually
Always good to end with laughter.
exactly,
So how do
exactly.
folks connect with you? Where do they find your book?
So you can find it on, major book sites, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. But you can also, I do have an author's website, GeralynRitter.com. You can read more about my journey. I try to post resources, other books that helped me on my journey. So, especially if you're a reader, please check it out. And there's a way to connect with me there. I do a fair amount of podcasts, and if you'd like to know where I'll be speaking, I do try to post that on my website. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, although more from a professional perspective than my personal journey. But we can't separate those pieces of who we are. So
Right.
please, I'd
Right.
love to hear from folks.
Awesome. All right. Well, it's just been such a joy. Thank you for, yes, blessing me, my audience
Oh,
with your story and your beautiful light.
well, thank you for what you do, and thank you to your audience. So we started this by saying we believe there's power in sharing our stories, and I just love that you help folks do that. So
Awesome.
all the best, and
Awesome.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock again. Just wanted to thank you for listening to the episode today and remind you to visit my website as well, teriwellbrock.com. You can sign up for my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, which is also jam-packed with information and strategies and blog pieces and guest blog pieces and links to shows. Thanks for, again, being here and being a part of this healing space. I very much appreciate you. All right. Bye-bye.